We love the outdoors, and whenever we have the chance to enjoy some fresh air, we seize it. This weekend, my husband, daughter, and I travelled from the city to the countryside for a little family vacation. We were excited to unwind, pick up some snacks, perhaps even go fishing and catch some trophy fish. My daughter had insisted on visiting the countryside, and we were more than willing to oblige. The place we intended to visit held a special significance for me. I had spent my early childhood there. My parents once owned a lovely cottage, inherited from my grandparents, which exuded the unique scent of the woods. However, as the village began to decline, my parents sold the house, and the area became home to elderly residents. Whenever we returned, we could always stay with one of them for a few days. We had arranged this in advance, packed all the essentials, and set off. The drive was short, just 2 hours with minimal traffic, making it the best option. The weather was perfect. My husband was at the wheel while my daughter and I enjoyed the scenery passing by. The landscape transitioned from quaint villages to lush forests and then back to small settlements. As we navigated the country roads, we had to proceed slowly, as recent rains had washed out the path. My daughter soon fell asleep, and I began to doze off as well. Suddenly, my husband pulled over, jolting me awake. I saw him unbuckle his seatbelt and exit the car. Curious, I followed his gaze to the side of the road, where an animal lay motionless. It was so dirty and stained that I could hardly discern its colour. I quickly unbuckled my seatbelt and got out to take a closer look. As I approached, I realised it was a fox, likely a victim of a car accident. The wet country road seemed merciless. How could someone leave it here to die? Sometimes I find it hard to comprehend human behaviour. Poor creature. Its eyes fluttered open and closed slowly. Her chest heaved up and down. She was breathing, but her condition was quite deplorable. My husband and I stood there in shock, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, our sleepy daughter jumped out of the car and rushed past us. She knelt beside the fox and began to stroke its head. "It's cute, but there's not much we can do," my husband told her. In response, our daughter looked at him with a seriousness I had never seen before. Her eyes filled with determination. She insisted she wouldn't leave the fox there, and she meant it. The nearest town was quite far, so we decided to take the animal to our village and see if anyone there could help. My husband carefully retrieved a blanket from the car, gently wrapped the fox in it, and placed it in the back seat. I climbed in next to it, resting its head in my lap. We had to act quickly. Time was of the essence. As we drove down the dirt road, we did so as fast as the terrain allowed. Our daughter spoke softly to the forest, assuring the fox that good people would help soon. The fox lay there, staring blankly into space, clearly unwell. At one point, it even vomited on the floor of the car. When we finally reached the village, we pulled up to the first house we saw with lights on and a fire burning inside. My husband rushed out of the car and knocked on the door. After a brief wait, an elderly man appeared, quickly assessing the situation. He stood there, scratching his head, before saying, "We should go to the herbalist. She's the only one who can help us in this situation." When we arrived at her hut, she was sitting on a bench, sorting through various bundles of herbs. "Grandma, help us. They sent us to you, saying you're the only one who can help." We showed her the poor animal. Grandma took one look and instructed us to bring it to her. Gathering her wrappings, she stepped out to see us off. The house was filled with the scent of hay and medicinal herbs, along with jars of marigold tea and other remedies unknown to me. She cleared a small table by the window and gestured for my husband to place the fox on it. As she examined the animal, she noted the broken paw, likely damaged ribs, and a probable concussion due to the vomiting. "It's a good thing you brought her to me," she said. "You got here just in time. Now go get me some clean water from the nearby spring. Leave her in the hayloft and return in a couple of days." We were surprised by Grandma's confidence, but felt we had no choice but to follow her instructions. At the entrance to her house, I had the distinct impression that Grandma was waiting for us, as if she knew we were coming. She sat on the bench, unfazed, and even had a water container ready at the entrance. Perhaps I was merely imagining things or being overly anxious. After all, she likely had many visitors who fetched water for her as a gesture of gratitude. We set off for the spring, which took a little while to find, as it was concealed by bushes. The area was undoubtedly beautiful, adorned with large green trees, and the cheerful song of a nightingale. We wouldn't have discovered it, if not for this unfortunate animal. We hadn't considered what we would do if it recovered, but we remained hopeful. We filled the container with water and made our way back. We left the fox where Grandma instructed and went to check in at the rest home. It didn't work out as we had hoped. We sat on the veranda, anxiously worrying about how the fox was doing. Our desire to go fishing or mushrooming had vanished. When our daughter woke up, we explained that it was too early to venture out. Puffing up her cheeks, she retreated to sit outside. After a couple of hours, we had breakfast and decided to send her to Grandma's house. We knocked on the door, but there was no response. After waiting a little while, we knocked again and ultimately decided to enter ourselves. Grandma was seated at her table, sipping tea by the stove. "You found her just in time," she said. "Come in and have some tea. I have something to tell you." We obediently took our seats at the table while my daughter left the box by the stove. A clean sheet lay in the wooden box and the fox's paws and stomach were bandaged. It appeared much better overall, but it was evident that it was still quite weak. So when the fox saw our daughter, it wagged its tail slightly, much like a dog. She approached it, greeted it softly, and sat beside it, gently stroking its head. "To get better," Grandma began, "but he won't be able to live in the wild anymore. It's too early to treat serious injuries, and he won't make a good hunter. You'll need to decide what to do with him. By the way, it's no coincidence that he got injured. I see your daughter has it on her way." She gestured towards her. "And the fates of this creature and your daughter are intertwined. I wouldn't want to sever that bond. Otherwise, trouble may ensue." My husband and I exchanged glances, his expression one of surprise, while I felt as though nothing could astonish me anymore. Grandma suddenly seemed less strange, as if she possessed foreknowledge of certain things. "All right, take him and go," she instructed, adopting a businesslike demeanor. "Here are some bags." She handed me the herbs she had gathered and wrote on a leaf instructions on when to administer them, cautioning me not to mix them up. I took the bag and, as a gesture of gratitude, offered her some money. Grandma waved the money away, saying, "I don't need it. I'd rather have a bit of your springtime. From the spring, and when you're back in our neighborhood, come by and tell me how the fox is doing, if he's all right." That's how she and I parted ways. The fox turned out to be a male, old enough for his age. We took him home, and he tolerated his injury well as we began to nurse him back to health. Our daughter attended kindergarten, running home each day after class to her new friend, whom she named Luchik. He learned to walk on a harness, although he still displayed occasional aggression, so we made sure not to leave our daughter mid-pace. Some time passed, and we decided to revisit the village once more. The roads, sky, and cars seemed familiar, but now we had a ray of sunshine with us on the journey. We arrived without any incidents and went straight to see the herbalist. She recognized Luchik immediately and ran to her, nuzzling against her affectionately. Afterward, we returned home, and while my husband and I were busy with our tasks, I caught sight of my daughter and the fox playing outside. Suddenly, I noticed Luchik bristling and jumping, appearing agitated. I rushed toward them, calling out for him to let her go. However, as I got closer, I realized my daughter was unharmed, sitting there with a surprised expression, while Luchik held a snake firmly in his teeth. He had saved her. In that moment, everything clicked into place, and I remembered the herbalist's words about their fates being intertwined. We had saved him, and he, in turn, had protected our daughter. Luchik lived with us for a few more years before he eventually passed over the rainbow, apparently having fulfilled his purpose in life. It's a touching story, and I thank you for listening until the end. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and also hit the bell so you won't miss any new videos. Have a wonderful day.